All right, so we got to talk about the anime betrayal that literally everybody could have seen happening, as it appears like Nancy Pelosi has completely stabbed progressives in the back on this entire dual track process and is trying to bring the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which, if you remember, is that shitty, watered down, Republican written infrastructure bill that doesn't go nearly far enough. And she is trying to bring that forward for a standalone vote before we are voting on the budget reconciliation package, which, if you've been following my coverage throughout the entire duration of this, you would know that that basically means that they are killing the reconciliation bill if it is allowed to pass before. So here from Bernie Sanders, he is telling people to hold the line. Okay, so this is exactly what we need to see from progressives in the face of such a sabotage like this from Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic establishment on, again, what is Joe Biden's agenda. Okay, this is not the Bernie Sanders agenda. Bernie Sanders wanted $6 trillion. We're talking about the $3.5 trillion number, which was already negotiated down and watered down significantly to fit in line with what Joe Biden wants. So here from Sanders, he's giving some good advice to the rest of progressives in Congress. Sanders demands House Democrats vote down the bipartisan bill if reconciliation package is not secured. So Senator Bernie Sanders on Tuesday implored his colleagues in the House to vote against a Senate-passed bipartisan infrastructure bill until Congress approves a far-reaching reconciliation package that includes anti-poverty measures and climate action. Quote, I strongly urge my House colleagues to vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill until Congress passes a strong reconciliation bill, Sanders said in a statement. And even though the Democrats' $3.5 trillion social infrastructure package is not yet ready, a widely criticized bipartisan infrastructure bill is expected to be brought to the House floor on Thursday, so tomorrow, after Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who said in June that the lower chamber would not take up either piece of legislation until the Senate passed both, reneged on her earlier pledge and scheduled a vote on the $550 billion bipartisan bill. So essentially, again, Nancy Pelosi is completely walking back on what she has been saying this entire time, which was the idea from the beginning. If you're going to have a dual track process where you have a shitty, watered down bipartisan one and you have a good partisan version of the bill, which is the $3.5 trillion one, the entire idea that they were selling everybody on from the beginning was, we are going to put these on Joe Biden's desk at the same time. That's what Joe Biden said he wants. It's what Nancy Pelosi said she wanted. It's what Chuck Schumer said she wanted. And now we have a complete and utter reversal of that, the anime betrayal everybody expected. But we have some pushback here because Representative Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, has made clear that in keeping with the two-track plan that Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden outlined months ago, dozens of House Democrats are prepared to vote against the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, which they're calling BIF, this week to secure passage of the more ambitious Build Back Better Act. And she is just adding on to Bernie Sanders' statement that he is strongly urging everybody votes against this. And Senate Budget Committee Chair Sanders on Tuesday encouraged his fellow progressives to hold the line, warning that prematurely approving BIF would essentially kill the popular Build Back Better Act, which is 100% clear. And he says, let's be crystal clear, said Sanders. If the bipartisan infrastructure bill is passed on its own on Thursday, this will be in violation of an agreement that was reached within the Democratic caucus in Congress. And more importantly, it will end all of the leverage that we have to pass a major reconciliation bill. Sanders continued saying, quote, that means there will be no serious effort to address the long neglected crises facing the working families of our country, the children, the elderly, the sick, and the poor. And it also means that Congress will continue to ignore the existential threat to our country and the planet with regard to climate change. So listen, Bernie Sanders is 100% correct here, and the rest of the Congressional Progressive Caucus led by Pramila Jayapal are also 100% correct here. This is a strategy that we have been talking about as a failsafe in our back pocket needed to be implemented should worse comes to worse. And so what are the lessons of the current situation? One, never trust the Democratic establishment. Never trust Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, the rest of them. They are entirely corrupted ghouls who will sell you out and stab you in the back the first chance that they get. So that's lesson number one. Don't trust the Democratic establishment at their word, okay? Lesson number two is, why did they separate these bills in the first place? Why did Bernie Sanders, why did the rest of the Congressional Progressive Caucus agree to this dual track process? I said this way back before this wasn't even a thing, but this is not an effective strategy, okay? This is what it was going to result in the end, in all likelihood, regardless, because that was the purpose of them separating the bills. They wanted a bipartisan one and a partisan one so that they could sabotage the partisan one. It's really that simple, okay? This was always going to be somewhat of an inevitability. We knew that conservative Democrats were always going to try to sabotage it, and the question was, how much are Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden going to be willing to actually fight fight them to pass the bigger and much more substantial $3.5 trillion bill. And the answer that we have now is they are not willing to fight at all. Okay, so we have had Bernie Sanders going out on all of the media shows, as well as Pramila Jayapal and the rest of the squad, really, who have been defending this strategy, which is, again, passing Joe Biden's agenda in its entirety. And meanwhile, we have conservatives who are trying to completely throw it out the window, including conservatives like Nancy Pelosi now, apparently. So lesson number 3 is we need to use our leverage right now, okay? This is exactly the moment that progressives have been working for to prove that they actually are willing to shoot the hostage and use their leverage. This is that moment, okay? If progressives give in and they pass or allow this bill to be passed, this bipartisan version of the infrastructure bill to be passed on its own, they will be entirely giving up all of their leverage, and there will be no reconciliation package, okay? In all likelihood, there would be nothing, or if there is something, it's going to be so watered down that it might as well be nothing, okay? So this is the situation that we have right now. Are progressives going to actually stand their ground? I don't know, but this is going to be a big litmus test because we're going to see how effective they are at actually governing. And if we know anything about recent history, it's, not looking too good in terms of how they have handled these types of situations in the past. So this is a big test right now, but if everybody follows Bernie Sanders' lead, the only other way that I could foreseeably see them being undercut is if a bunch of House Republicans decide to get on board with the bipartisan version, which they aren't as of right now, but, and don't tell them I said this, but if House Republicans were smart, what they would basically do in order to kill the reconciliation bill is they would go and they would all support the bipartisan bill, which would basically mean that the squad and the Congressional Progressive Caucus withholding their votes doesn't matter if you have enough Republicans who are signing on to that, and they could pass the bipartisan bill as a standalone bill, and then nobody ever talks about the reconciliation again. So that's the only conceivable circumstance where progressives actually don't have any leverage, but that's not the circumstance we have right now. So as of right now, everybody needs to listen to Bernie motherfucking Sanders and follow his lead, hold the line, and don't vote for this Republican infrastructure package unless the reconciliation package is passed at the same time and in its entirety.